In the deep, whispering woods surrounding the ancient city of Odessa, a delicate balance of power between the supernatural and the mundane had been maintained for centuries. Here, amidst the tangled growth and shadowed paths, Elara, a novice witch with a fervent curiosity about the forbidden arts of blood magic, found herself drawn to the darker whispers of the forest. On a particularly damp and foggy evening, with the moon hidden behind thick clouds, Elara ventured deeper into the woods than she had ever dared. Her heart was set on harvesting the rare night-blooming heartsbane, a flower said to bloom only under the cover of a moonless night, crucial for her experiments in blood magic. Guided by the soft glow of her lantern, her steps were careful and quiet, attuned to the secretive sounds of the nocturnal wilderness. As she navigated through the underbrush, her attention was caught by a faint metallic glint on the ground ahead. Curiosity piqued, she approached, only to recoil in horror as she stumbled upon a scene straight from a nightmare. A vampire, ancient and terrifying even in his vulnerability, was ensnared in a hunter's trap. The trap, made of intricately woven silver chains and arcane runes, was designed not just to restrain but to torment. Its magic seeped into the vampire's flesh like venom, causing wounds that glowed with a sickly light. The vampire, whom she later learned was named Lucien, was a pitiful sight. His once proud figure was bowed in agony, his face contorted with a mix of pain and rage. His eyes, glowing a fierce, unnatural red, found Elara's. In that prolonged gaze, a silent plea was communicated, an entreaty for mercy or perhaps an end to his torment. Compelled by a mix of compassion and thrill at encountering one of the night's most whispered-about creatures, Elara made a swift decision. She would free him, not just for altruism, but for the allure of the unknown and the unspoken promise of power that such a creature could offer or teach. She approached cautiously, aware of the danger posed by the wounded predator before her. Speaking in soft, soothing tones, she worked to disable the trap, her fingers nimble and careful not to touch the silver directly. The task was arduous, the mechanisms complex, designed to thwart tampering. Each movement had to be precise, as a wrong move could tighten the chains further. As she worked, Lucien's labored breaths filled the air, a haunting reminder of his suffering. Finally, with a click, the last chain fell away, and the vampire was freed. Lucien collapsed, weakened by the ordeal and the prolonged exposure to silver. As he lay recovering, Elara watched him with a mixture of fear and fascination. Once he regained some strength, he rose, towering over her, his presence both majestic and terrifying. His voice, when he finally spoke, was soft yet carried an undeniable edge of strength. "Little witch," he said, his red eyes burning not with malice but an intense curiosity. "You have saved me, and thus a debt between us is formed." Elara, feeling a chill of both fear and excitement, nodded, acknowledging the pact. "Yes, and in return I ask for your protection as I delve deeper into the powers that govern blood and night." Lucien's lips curled into a semblance of a smile, more a bearing of sharp, deadly teeth than a gesture of friendliness. "Very well, I shall protect you, but be warned, the path you choose is dark and fraught with perils, little witch. And often it is not the night that is to be feared, but the darkness in one's own heart. Thus began their fragile alliance, born in the shadows of an ancient forest under the watchful eyes of creatures that stirred in the dark. Little did Elara know this fateful encounter would lead her down a path that blurred the lines between predator and protector, between sacrifice and salvation. As the pact between Elara and Lucien solidified, their nights became intertwined with whispered secrets and shared knowledge. Lucien, ancient and cunning, had walked the earth for centuries, witnessing the rise and fall of empires and the evolution of the supernatural world. From him, Elara learned the intricate history of vampires, their strengths, their vulnerabilities, and the delicate balance of power they maintained with other nocturnal entities. Meanwhile, Elara introduced Lucien to the clandestine arts of witchcraft, particularly her explorations into blood magic, a field that fascinated Lucien, given its inherent ties to his own existence. Together, they delved into old texts and performed experiments under the cloak of night, pushing the boundaries of their understanding and the ethical limits of their practices. During one such nocturnal meeting, as they pored over a particularly ancient grimoire, Lucien shared with Elara the legend of an ultimate power attainable through a dark ritual known only to the oldest of vampire kind. This ritual, if performed under a rare celestial alignment, could grant the practitioner immense power by binding the life force of a vampire into the witch's own essence. The heart of the ritual, Lucien explained, his voice low and tinged with a hint of dread, is the heart of a vampire, willingly given. It is a sacrifice of great significance and consequence not to be undertaken lightly. Elara listened, her mind racing with possibilities. The power Lucien described was beyond anything she had imagined. Yet she sensed his caution, his reluctance, even to discuss such matters. "And has this ritual ever been performed?" she inquired, her gaze fixed on the ancient symbols scrawled across the grimoire's pages. Lucien's eyes darkened. "Rumors say it has long ago, but at great cost. Such power is not granted without sacrifice, and the universe demands balance in all things." The seeds of ambition, however, were already sown in Elara's heart. She mulled over the possibility of convincing Lucien to partake in the ritual, to offer his heart so she might gain the power to reshape the world. Yet, she knew this was not something to ask lightly, or without offering something of equal value in return. In the weeks that followed, Elara's thoughts were consumed by the ritual. She began to gather the necessary components: a dagger forged from meteoric iron, herbs sanctified by moonlight, and stones that pulsed with the earth's life force. She prepared the ritual site in a clearing bordered by ancient oaks, under which countless secrets had been whispered through the ages. Lucien, ever observant, watched Elara's preparations with a growing sense of unease. He saw the change in her, the single-minded focus that had overtaken her usual spirited curiosity. One night, as they stood under the starlit sky, he confronted her. "You intend to perform the ritual, do you not?" he asked, his voice a mix of resignation and sorrow. Elara met his gaze, her decision clear in her resolute eyes. "I believe this is my path, Lucien. With this power, think of what we could achieve. No longer would we skulk in the shadows. We could bring a new order to both our kinds." Lucien's response was heavy with the weight of lived centuries. And what of the cost, Elara? Are you prepared to bear it? Elara nodded, though a flicker of doubt shadowed her heart. I am ready, she asserted, though her voice trembled slightly with the gravity of her own words. Lucian stepped closer, his presence enveloping her in a cold yet comforting embrace. Then let it be done, he whispered. But remember, the night is long and full of terrors that even the greatest power cannot hold at bay forever. As they parted that night, both felt the looming presence of destiny, an unspoken understanding that their next meeting under the blood moon would alter the course of their lives irrevocably. The days leading up to the blood moon were filled with a palpable tension that hung over Elara like a heavy cloak. Each night she visited the secluded clearing, refining the ritual site with obsessive precision. The clearing was circled by towering ancient oaks, their gnarled branches etched against the sky like dark veins. In the center, Elara laid out a pentagram with stones that shimmered with an inner light, each one carefully positioned to align with the celestial energies of the upcoming eclipse. Inside her small, dimly lit cottage, Elara's preparations continued. The walls were lined with shelves overflowing with arcane books, dried herbs, and jars filled with mysterious ingredients. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the musky undertone of dried blood used in her practice. At the heart of her preparations was the ritual dagger, its blade forged from meteoric iron, lying on a velvet cloth. The metal seemed to absorb the light around it, casting eerie shadows across the room. As she prepared her implements, Elara rehearsed the incantations she would use. The words were ancient, spoken in a tongue that was rarely used even in the darkest of magical practices. With each recitation, a chill ran down her spine, a reminder of the gravity of the ritual she was about to undertake. She knew that each syllable had to be perfect, each gesture precise, or risk catastrophic consequences. Meanwhile, Lucian found himself wrestling with a tumult of emotions. Despite the centuries he had walked the earth, the prospect of this ritual unnerved him. He had seen much, endured much, but the thought of his heart, the literal source of his life and power, being used in such a manner brought a sense of vulnerability he hadn't felt in ages. The night before the ritual, Lucian visited Elara for what could be the last time under normal circumstances. He found her in the midst of a trance, her eyes closed, her breath steady as she communed with the unseen forces around her. He watched her for a moment, admiring the strength and resolve that emanated from her. Finally, he cleared his throat to announce his presence. Elara opened her eyes, her gaze piercing through the dimness. "Lucian," she greeted, her voice steady yet betraying a hint of the turmoil within. "You are prepared, then?" Lucian asked, stepping closer to the ritual table where the dagger lay. "I am," Elara confirmed, her eyes briefly flitting to the blade. "And you? Have you made peace with this?" Lucian paused, the weight of centuries bearing down on him. "I believe I have. To be part of something greater, to possibly end my eternal wandering. It is a fitting close, should it come to that." Elara reached out, taking his hand. Her touch was warm, alive, filled with the pulsing beat of life, a stark contrast to the cold, unchanging existence of a vampire. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trusting me with this, Lucian, for everything." Their conversation drifted into the night, filled with shared memories and laughter, a bittersweet symphony of their time together. When Lucian finally left, the first hint of dawn was painting the sky with strokes of pink and orange. They parted with a lingering look, each carrying their own fears and hopes for what was to come. As the day passed, Elara's preparations reached their zenith. She dressed in a robe of deep crimson, the color of blood and power, her hair braided with herbs and small bones. As the sun set, she made her way to the clearing, each step deliberate, aware that she was walking a path few had ever dared, and fewer still had survived. The ritual site awaited, bathed in the light of the rising blood moon, its eerie glow casting long shadows among the ancient oaks. Elara took her place at the center, her heart beating a frantic rhythm as she readied herself to summon powers that could either grant her unimaginable strength or doom her soul forever. Under the blood-red light of the lunar eclipse, Elara stood within the ritual circle, her figure a solitary silhouette against the sprawling darkness of the ancient forest. The pentagram beneath her feet glowed faintly, its stones pulsing with an energy that seemed to sync with the beating of her own heart. She felt the power of the blood moon coursing through her, magnifying her senses and flooding her with a sense of invincibility. Lucien approached the circle, his movements graceful, yet tinged with an undeniable tension. As he entered the perimeter of the pentagram, the air thickened, the boundary of the circle humming with a silent, vibrating power. He met Elara's gaze, his eyes reflecting the moonlight, his expression a complex tapestry of resolve and resignation. "Are you certain this is the path you wish to take, Elara?" Lucian asked, his voice a low murmur against the rustling of the leaves. "Once begun, there can be no turning back." Elara nodded, her resolve stealing. "I am ready, Lucien. This is the way forward for both of us. With this power, I can protect us, change things for our kind." Her voice, though firm, held an undercurrent of desperation, a plea for understanding, if not acceptance. Lucian took a deep, unnecessary breath, a vestige of his long-lost humanity. "Then let us begin," he conceded, stepping closer to her within the circle. The ritual ingredients lay neatly arranged on a small altar beside Elara. The dagger, the herbs, and a chalice filled with a concoction of potent magical substances. Elara began to chant, her voice rising and falling with the cadence of the ancient spell. The words felt alive, writhing in the air around her, seeping into the ground and the sky and the very fabric of the night. Lucian watched her, his face a mask of stoic acceptance, the red glow of his eyes dimming as the ritual drew on his essence. As the chanting reached a crescendo, Elara took up the dagger. The blade shimmered with a dark light, seeming to throb with anticipation. Lucian closed his eyes, his chest bared, his immortal heart beating a slow, deliberate rhythm. Elara raised the dagger, her hand steady, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But in that moment, something within her faltered. The weight of what she was about to do, what she was about to sacrifice, crashed into her like a physical blow. The dagger trembled in her grasp, and her chant faltered. She looked at Lucien, this creature who had shared with her the secrets of the night, who had protected her, taught her, cared for her. How could she end that? How could she use his trust, his life as a stepping stone to her own power? "No," she whispered, a single tear tracking down her cheek. "I can't do this." She dropped the dagger, the sound of it hitting the ground a shattering crash in the silence of the night. Lucien's eyes snapped open, surprise etching his features. He watched her, confusion and relief warring in his expression. "Elara." Elara shook her head, stepping back, breaking the physical connection between them. "I'm sorry, Lucian. I thought I could do it. I thought I wanted this power, but not like this. Not at the cost of your life or my soul." The circle's energy built up and now, suddenly without direction, sparked erratically. The ritual, incomplete and improperly concluded, reacted. The backlash of magic was swift and violent. The pentagram erupted with light, and a shock wave of force knocked both of them to the ground. When the light and energy finally subsided, Elara lay crumpled at the edge of the circle, her body motionless. Lucian crawled to her side, his own energy severely drained by the ritual's demands and the subsequent explosion of uncontrolled magic. He cradled her in his arms, feeling the faint pulse of her heart, the shallow breath of her lungs. She was alive, but just barely, the magic having taken its toll on her mortal form. "I'm here," Lucian murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I've got you." As dawn began to break over the forest, Lucian, the immortal vampire, sat holding the broken body of Elara, the novice witch whose love had saved them both, but at a terrible cost. They had sought power only to find profound sacrifice, a tragic, unintended betrayal of her own ambitions that had bound their fates together more permanently than any ritual ever could. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the ancient trees, casting a gentle light on the tragic scene, Lucian remained motionless, cradling Elara in his arms. The forest was silent, save for the soft sounds of the awakening day. Elara's breathing was shallow, her face pale and drawn from the magical backlash that had nearly claimed her life. With great care, Lucian lifted Elara, carrying her out of the ritual circle, which was now scorched and barren, a stark reminder of the night's events. He moved through the forest, a path he had walked countless times under the cover of night, now ominous in the morning light. His destination was clear, the old witch's cottage, where Elara had spent countless hours poring over her books and concoctions. Upon reaching the cottage, Lucian gently laid Elara on her bed, surrounded by the many talismans and herbs that spoke of her life as a witch. He knew her condition was beyond the aid of conventional medicine. It was the magic that had harmed her, and potentially only magic could heal her. Lucian's mind raced as he considered all he knew of healing spells and potions, but his knowledge was limited in the arts of witchcraft. Determined, Lucian scoured Elara's shelves, looking for any text or recipe that might help. His fingers found a small leather-bound book, its cover worn, the pages filled with Elara's neat script. It was her personal grimoire, a collection of her most trusted spells and potions. Frantically, he searched the pages until he found a section marked Healing Arts. The spell required ingredients that Lucian was unfamiliar with, but thankfully, Elara's meticulous organization meant that he found everything he needed within the cottage. The potion required the blood of a willing supernatural being as its core ingredient, and Lucian did not hesitate. Using a silver blade, he cut his palm, letting his blood, A vampire's blood, infused with centuries of life, drip into the cauldron where the potion simmered. As he chanted the incantation Elara had noted down, Lucien felt the magic stir, a warm breeze that smelled of summer rain filling the small room. He stirred the potion, watching as it turned from a dark crimson to a shimmering gold. Once it was ready, he carefully lifted Elara's head and brought the potion to her lips, encouraging her to drink. The effect was not immediate, and Lucien watched over Elara with a mix of hope and deep fear. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky, casting beams of light through the cottage windows, painting the room with warmth. Slowly, Elara's breathing deepened, her color returning in faint blushes to her cheeks. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting Lucien's anxious gaze. A weak smile touched her lips as she recognized him. Lucien. Her voice was a whisper, hoarse from disuse. "I'm here, Elara. You're safe," Lucien reassured her, his voice thick with emotion. "You scared me." Elara's smile deepened, her hand reaching out to touch his face, feeling the coolness of his skin against her fingertips. "I'm sorry," she murmured, "for everything." "No apologies, Elara. We survived. That's all that matters now," Lucien said, his relief palpable. Elara nodded, her energy still low, but her spirit visibly lifted by the potion and Lucien's presence. "What now?" she asked, a hint of trepidation in her voice. "Now, we heal, we learn, and we move forward together," Lucien answered, his commitment clear. As they sat in the quiet cottage, the weight of their ordeal behind them, Lucien and Elara knew that their path forward was uncertain. The world of magic and the supernatural was fraught with danger, but in each other they had found not just an ally but a companion. They had confronted the darkest parts of their ambitions and desires, and in the end, they found that the greatest power lay not in dominion or might, but in sacrifice and love, their greatest protection against the shadows yet to come.